Hello and welcome back. What we're going to go through in the training for today is rehabbing real estate. And rehabbing, a lot of people get involved in real estate and they say to themselves, I don't want to knock a hammer. I can't see myself doing that. I'll tell you the truth, I can't see myself knocking a hammer either. But we're going to go through how an investor who can barely screw in a light bulb compared to an investor who is really good with his or her hands can actually make money within real estate by doing rehabs. I've got my good friend and my business partner on the line, Bob. So Bob, can you kind of get right into it, jump right in, and kind of explain rehabs, period?
Absolutely. Darius, when I put these things together as we switch slides here, I always pull pictures off the internet when I put together our slides. And so I put in Rehab Real Estate, and one of the pictures that came up is the picture that you see on the screen right in front of you. Here it is, a picture of Charlie Sheen. And I just started laughing. I'm like, why is he under rehab and real estate? And it dawned on me he's under there for rehab. That's not what we're talking about. So we're just going to let Charlie go by the wayside there. We're going to come back and talk about what rehabbing really does. And all rehab does is you're buying a property that's below market value and you're bringing it up to average for the neighborhood. And I want you guys to write that down. It's very important. It's average for the neighborhood in most cases. If you're trying to retail it out the back end, you're going to fix it a lot nicer than that. If you're trying to rent the property or hang on to it, you're going to fix it as average for the neighborhood. So basically all rehabbing is you're going to acquire the property, you're going to find the funds to acquire it, you're going to find it, you're going to find the funds to acquire it, and then once you acquire it, you're going to fix it up, and then you're going to turn around and sell it. And anytime you sell
Exactly.
within 6 months of buying it, what's called a flip anyway. That's all it is. And there's a lot of pros and cons to the strategy. And I know, Darius, you're a rehabber as well. And Darius and I are the same kind of rehabber. I used to rehab. Now my hand holds a pen a lot better than it holds paintbrush. It's a mistake. So, that's why God invented checks is I'm a rehabber, but I'm like an armchair rehabber, and I let somebody else do all the work. And that's some of the pros and cons of the strategy because, a lot of folks out there want to do all the work themselves. Well, no offense, folks, but I think you're buying yourself a job if you do that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a big thing about rehab too, is myself, I cannot rehab anything. I cannot rehab, a paper plate, let alone a house. So what I do is I rely on the expertise of people around me, and all you need to do is be able to manage those people and be able to find the right ones. And that's what leads me towards the pros and cons of rehabbing. One of the biggest pros is this is one of the best ways to be able to add what we call force appreciation, right? There's natural appreciation, which will just happen from a property kind of accruing value over time, independent of really any outside circumstances. Then there's force appreciation, which means that you are doing something physically to the property to enhance its value. So it is the fastest way, number one, fastest way to add value to a property, the biggest pro. One of the biggest pros is it allows you to be able to work with a larger base of properties, meaning you can secure REOs, you can secure short sales, you can secure abandoned properties, probate properties, properties from the auction that might need some work. In fact, they definitely need some work. The biggest benefit is you can get those properties way, way, way below market value, invest some money and some time in actually rehabbing and fixing them up, and then you can sell that property off for retail, making serious profit. It happens to be one of the most profitable strategies out there. Now, given all those pros, there are some cons. The biggest con is it can be expensive. You can be investing $20,000, $50,000, heck, even $200,000 into a property to rehab it. You can sometimes get stuck with the property and not have a buyer in place, yet you still have carrying costs. You still need to pay maybe a private money lender or pay a hard money lender. Or if you got finance, you have those financing costs that are still being incurred. You may have to pay to winterize a property, keep the property safe, and all this time it's eating into your profit margin. One of the things too, the biggest con I see, are people just are not buying the right property to rehab. They think that any old property that needs a lot of work is a great property to rehab. That's not necessarily the case. We need to look at market indicators, average days on market in an area, comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and seeing what buying trends are and what people can actually afford in that area. So those are the pros and cons to it, and we'll move on to really getting into detail of what a fixer-upper versus a blower-upper is. So,
Well,
Bob, why don't you get right into that?
the guy that comes up with the weird stuff. I think you get the nail right on the head. I think a lot of folks get into rehabs and they don't really realize, what they're getting into. And a lot of times I've seen folks get into properties that, oh, I can get this property for 3,500. Well, that's awesome. But you're going to have to put $30,000 or $40,000 work into the property. And they don't realize that. They just see what the purchase price is versus everything that has to go into the property to bring it up to snuff. And folks, when you're just getting started in rehab, you're going to want to do what we call lipstick rehabbing. You want to be able to find a rehab that just needs, a nice coat of paint, some carpet, maybe a new roof, tops, a little bit of landscaping, and now you've rehabbed the property. You don't want to get into properties that have structural issues or where you have to add a bedroom or a bath or those types of things. And so I call those fixer-uppers versus blower-uppers. You don't want a blower-upper, you want a fixer-upper. And, you have to think about things when you rehab a property. You have to think about, well, who's going to actually do the work? I'm working on a rehab right now that I hired a contractor. He brought in his team. My contractor went off the deep end, and it's a long, long story. And now I had to go out and actually take over his team and run the job. That's not what I do. And I find that some of these guys are good, some are bad. You need to bring in a good team, to run your job. And of course, anytime somebody tells you they want to get paid in cash up front, run the other way. You want to make sure that they're a legitimate business person, and that they've got a good track record and they can show you other houses that they rehabbed. You also, there's lots of hidden, I'm going to say, potholes, if you would, in getting insurance. A lot of times the insurance you get on a rehab property, you have to have your property insured during the rehab. But I will tell you that there are insurance agents that will sell you the wrong kind of insurance. And if somebody trips and falls on your property during the rehab and they sue you, they could actually get your property. So you want to be very, very careful about that. And the third thing that comes from a matter near and dear to my heart is pest control. I know that sounds really goofy, but if you're in an area of the country that's got any kind of termites, and you and your rehabbing crew, if they discover any evidence of past termites, even though there's nothing active at the time, you need to go in and fumigate that place so that if you sell it to somebody down the road and they end up with termites, you can say, hey, you know what, we fumigated it, and that's your issue, not mine. So there's, like anything in real estate, it's got its pluses and its minuses. I think real estate in general, the pluses outweigh the minuses. I love the rehabbing game, but only when I'm holding a pen and not the paintbrush. And then finally, as you really start looking at rehabs, there's some things you need to pay attention to. And Darius, I know you do a lot of rehabs. What are some of those things?
Sure. One of the big things is due diligence when you're looking at a property that you're considering buying. What I mean by that is crunching the numbers, obviously thinking about exit strategy, but more importantly is an actual inspection and a thorough inspection of the property. It's not good enough to just walk in there and kind of look at the roof and look down in the basement and look at the boiler and kind of figure things out that way. You really need to have a professional inspector come into the property, go through it in great detail and be nitpicky. You want them to be able to find things, right, that you didn't see and things that aren't apparent to the naked eye. Structural issues can be extremely costly. Certain things with the roof can be extremely costly. Mold, right? I mean, there are horror stories of even properties out in Arizona that some of my buddies have went to go purchase that had these awkwardly extremely low purchase prices. They came to find out later on that these were properties where people were actually cooking meth in them. I mean, so literally you strike a match and you put it up against the wall and the whole place can go ablaze. So you need to really look at these things in detail and you need to have an inspector.
And Darius, any problems that you run into is going to affect how long it takes you to finish the rehab, and that ultimately affects your financing. because a lot of folks will get, financing, but usually it's private financing to put on a property. And they'll say, oh, well, we'll be in and out of this property in a month or 2 months or 3 months. Well, sometimes you run into problems like your potential meth house or, like bad sheetrock down in Florida or whatever. And all of a sudden your 1 month rehab or your 3 week rehab turns into a 2 or 3 month project, and then you have to sell it. Now you've got to have different type of financing, or at least a contingency plan for your private investors to get their money back to them in a certain period of time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there, Bob. And I know when doing any type of rehab, there can be hidden costs in there too. And I'd love for us to discuss that. And from my perspective, one of the biggest hidden costs is what I call the oops factor. Basically, not taking into account what will happen, because it will happen eventually if you're doing enough rehabs, where you do not sell this property at the appropriate time. How can you afford to keep this property for an additional 3 months or 6 months and still not have your income completely disintegrate? So what are some hidden costs out there, Bob, that you can see when a person is doing a rehab?
Things like plumbing that you don't realize, or things like, I'll give you a great example. I was doing a rehab up in Indianapolis, and the tenant moved in, and a month later, all of a sudden, their plumbing started backing up into the basement. And what it was a big, huge tree limb had crushed the pipe out by the street. She used the facilities infrequently enough that we didn't notice the problem until after she'd lived there for a month. So there's those types of things. There's mold in the walls people don't realize. There might be termite damage, and when you pull the sheetrock off a wall, you'll find you have to replace an entire wall because of sheetrock. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and I'm going to just reiterate what you said earlier, how important it is to get an inspector to go out and go through the property with a fine-tooth comb, because that $100 or a couple $100 that you spend up front can literally save you thousands over the long term. So there's just a lot of little nuances to rehabbing, and I know a lot of our folks have questions. Darius, how can they get those questions answered?
Sure. Now, obviously, we went through this training here. You got some great information about rehabbing, but we really just scratched the surface. You see, Bob, myself, and our other partners have built substantial businesses within real estate using many different strategies. We basically have compiled years of experience into something that we have called REAP. What REAP stands for is Real Estate Action Plan, and we're going to give this to you 100% for free. All you need to do is enter your information on the right side of the screen, your first name and your email, and instantly we will send you the first segment of the training. Now here's how it works. It's a 30-day training course. We send you an email every other day that's packed full of action steps. We go through strategies, how to raise capital, how to be able to locate properties, how to analyze properties, how to find buyers, how to work with investors. We go through all different types of strategies, from short sale to wholesale, rehabbing, REO, private money, notes, commercial, buy and hold, multifamily dwellings. We really go through the whole gamut. But more than anything else, we give you specific things that you can do to duplicate our successful businesses that are not only profitable, but they're thriving and have been even during this, in quotes, downturn economy. So the big thing too is we understand that things have changed over the last few years. That's why, as an added bonus, we're going to give you immediately a video, a short 5 to 7 minute video, which really goes into detail of what's happening in today's market. We highlight opportunities that people aren't even speaking about anymore, or rather, they don't even know about them, period. In fact, we're also going to go through what we call our 4 pillars of real estate success, the 4 things you have got to be doing right to build a substantial business, and the things that we know we have done right, which have separated us from the people out there that have fell short. So again, just enter your information on the right-hand side or way down below, take it to the same exact place, and we look forward to seeing you on the other side in that video. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next training. Okay.
All righty. So one last one. I don't do short sales.
Well, I used to be a master of them.
I know you did. So that's why I left